Hello, robot voice, and hello, everyone. I am excited to talk about QR codes today, and I kind of want to give you a little bit of an outline of the structure that I'm going to be doing. I'm going to talk a little bit about QR codes and what they are, and how they can be useful. And we're also going to try and build a QR code um, together if you so choose. Or you can watch me do it. We can kind of generate a QR code for my website, which I tried to do yesterday. I learned a lot about not making QR codes funny colors because they're hard to read. If you have any questions, I can like see all of you. So make sure you give me like a wave. I'm happy to answer any questions. And if you can't wave, feel free to unmute and interrupt. I don't mind. So we can get started. I'm just gonna, and I apologize because I made these graphics, but they're not super accessible. So if you have some trouble seeing the text, just let me know and I can read it out. I'm going to touch on it anyway, but it's not super contrasted. All right. So a QR code and how can you use them? This is the title of the presentation. A QR code is really cool. It's an image that's generated that represents a collection of data. So a QR code can be used to give people information in a really condensed way. Oh, someone's in here. So you can link websites, you can link photos, videos, you can link all kinds of stuff. And I'll show you later when we build the QR code, all the different things that you can actually like use in a QR code. But I think for for a gallery or a small museum context, a URL is going to be like a website is going to be probably the way that you're going to use it most, or a video if you have video information that you want to share with a viewer. QR codes are great because you can pack a lot of dense information into like a really easily scannable image instead of trying to sort of put a lot of like text and paragraphs and information and graphs into your gallery or museum, especially if you're short on space. They're going to be really handy. And now that a lot of people have access to smartphones as well as data, you don't even necessarily need Wi-Fi, although that's like a really good consideration to have in your space if you have access to some like a guest Wi-Fi. That's going to be really handy and it'll probably make it a little bit more accessible, but it's definitely not a necessity anymore. Let's see if I can scroll this down. Most QR codes now, as many of you have probably realized throughout the pandemic, are being used to link people to menus at restaurants, for example. And you probably realize that many QR code readers don't even require apps anymore. A lot of phones just have that built into the camera. So it's super, super handy. You can just put your camera up to the QR code and it'll open up any kind of information for your guests or patrons. One important consideration with using QR codes is just to make sure that the QR codes are really easy to photograph. So they're in good shape, they might be laminated in a space where people can like really get center to them. So making sure that there's not a lot of other stuff around or like sculptures around or something that they can like bump or damage if they're trying to get access to that image. And then, so we're going to go and build a QR code through one of these websites that I really prefer, which is the free QR code generator. After this talk and some questions, but I kind of wanted to talk a little bit more about like how QR codes can be applied in like a museum or gallery context. They're obviously becoming more useful for things like reading menus at a restaurant, but in a gallery or museum setting, they can also be used to show different like facts or history about like an artwork or an object. So for example, if you have an artifact, you can use a QR code to link the viewer to a page that talks a little bit about where that object came from, the languages that people spoke or continue to speak, where it was found, how it was found, any of the history or facts about like it's like travels through time. So that they're really handy for that. Or for example, like an artwork, if you're showing an artwork, you can link to the artist's website or their social media accounts. You can also link historical paintings to websites that are dedicated. So, I mean, we're probably not dealing necessarily with like a Van Gogh or something, but if you had a Van Gogh, you could sort of link that painting to that website, to the Van Gogh website, and would have all kinds of information about like different Van Goghs, where those things are located. So they're really handy for sharing information about a piece, especially about its history, about its like facts, how it was acquired, etc. And that can be a lot of like really awesome information for a viewer, especially if they really like the piece or artifact. But it can also be really great because you don't have to print out like really lengthy title cards, which I know can be like, they're difficult to format and a lot of people often don't read them. I've seen a few studies that show that like when someone goes into a gallery setting and they see the big paragraphs on the wall like talking about the show, they'll always read the shortest paragraph no matter where it's located in the paragraph. So, and that's the only one that they'll look at. So they won't read really long sections of text. And maybe you're familiar with that because of the way that like a lot of internet blogs are set up, or the way that social media it kind of uses like text for marketing. The shorter, the better. And if somebody really wants to go and research that object, they have the option to using a QR code. Another way that QR codes can be used is to link people to your social media. If you have social media, your email marketing list, if you use email marketing, it can also link to things like fundraisers, donation areas, like if you want to accept digital donations, which I think is a really great idea. People can obtain that information through a QR code at your front desk or on your door, or at the end of a show, however you want to kind of lay that out. And in a QR code, you can actually add your logo or add the logo of the thing that it's linking you to, so people really know like what the different QR codes are for. So for example, you could put an Instagram logo inside of a QR code, and that would help people understand that it was linking to Instagram. The other great thing about a QR code is that you can use it to garner feedback. So if you want anonymous feedback that you can use, for example, for your Sask Arts Board funding, like the 3-year cycle funding, which I haven't had to do for a little while, so I'm a little bit like, what's the title again? If you wanted to like garner feedback or sign up pages that you can have already digitized, you can use that. You can do that using a QR code. So people can provide feedback on the exhibition. They can sign up, they can tell you a little bit where they're from. And that's as easy as just creating a little SurveyMonkey website and sharing it. So it's kind of a great way to have that data. The other thing that is really good about QR codes is that they can also provide a tour of the gallery or information about the work in spaces where galleries or museums are understaffed or are volunteer run. So you can have extra information that a volunteer or someone who's or a space that's understaffed can't necessarily give the viewer, gives them a little bit more context. And it gives them a little bit more information without having to necessarily specialize in that information, which I think is a really great opportunity, especially for smaller spaces, to sort of amplify the experience of people coming through your spaces. And I think I was going to talk just about like some important considerations for QR codes, and then we're going to build a QR code. So a couple things to keep in mind when you're using QR codes. They really need to be clear and concise, in a really easily accessible space. You need to double check that they're scannable before you utilize them, because you don't want them to link to a page that doesn't exist or an object that doesn't exist or be unreadable. And one thing about them is that you can choose to make them, if you sign up for the QR code generator, you can choose to make them static or dynamic. A dynamic QR code a dynamic QR code will allow you to edit the information that you're sharing without having to change the QR code, which is really important. And then the other most important part is that, especially for Google ranking, which is like a kind of a separate topic, but it's still important. It's important that anything you link to using the QR code is mobile optimized, because it will be mobile devices that are using the QR codes. You need to make sure that the websites are available in a mobile format. And that you can kind of check if you can tell if a website is optimized for mobile by just like going to that website on your phone and seeing if it shows up really nice, or if it or if you have to kind of like scroll around and like zoom or pinch like to get like the information on the website. So that's like an important consideration, especially if you're using a website that you've created yourself. I think it's extra important to kind of make sure that you have it optimized for mobile, and most like websites will allow you to do that now. So let's see. I think I have to go here. All right. So this is one of my favorite QR code generators that we're going to look at, and we're going to create a really easy QR code. So you'll see here that it gives you a lot of options for different things you can share. So for example, you can use a QR code to link people to your Wi-Fi. You can, if you have an app or an image or a PDF, if you have, if you're into cryptocurrency, if you want people to be able to email you, if you want people to link to your website or listen to music, you can do a lot with a little QR code, which is pretty exciting, I think, although it can seem really daunting. So today we're just going to do a website. So I'm going to show you. This is my own website. And you'll see over here, how do I make this smaller? Sorry, I can't see past the Zoom video here. So you'll see that I've made a logo here, and you can download just the JPEG is probably the easiest, or if you're incorporating it into like a vector file document. So if you're making, if you're doing an InDesign or Illustrator file where you're like formatting your text to go with an artwork, you can download a scalable QR code. But for today's purposes, I think we can just use a JPEG. In this frame section, you can choose if you want to add some little frames. If you sign up, you have more options, and I definitely recommend signing up. You can change the shape and color depending on your aesthetic preferences if you so choose. There's lots of different options. just be mindful that, as I learned yesterday, I made this like teal and it wasn't able to be picked out by a phone. So you can get creative, but make sure that it works before you print that off. You can also upload a logo here in the Scan Me section. Your logo can show up there. So if you have a transparent background logo, you can upload a logo to this section so that it'll show whatever. If you are linking to a social media page, you can upload an Instagram logo. If you're linking to your homepage, you can put your logo in there. You can really get creative. So then you can just download and it'll ask you to sign up, but you don't need to sign up to create a QR code. If you're creating a bunch of them, it's probably recommended. So there we go. We've got our QR code there. If you can see it and you're not using your cell phone to call in today, you can actually use your cell phone to take a look at this QR code, and it should, with just your camera, let you go. It'll pop you up to my website. And you can ask me any questions if you like about that. I'll give you all a chance to see if it works for you, and I'll try it too. Did it work for everyone? I can't see anyone's faces, so I don't know. You can feel free to unmute and let me know if it was able to work for you. Perfect, Larry. That's awesome. So it's as easy as that, honestly. You can link to any part of your website. If you're tech savvy, you can create web pages to help share information. If you're not tech savvy, you can find a willing millennial, probably through the summer programs, or there's any other way you can find a handy millennial. Oh, perfect. Thanks, Wendy. I can see you in the chat there. So they're super easy to create, and the website that I use, which I can link you to in the chat if you like, that's the website that I like to use. It's super handy. I think that I quit once. That's the website I like to use. You can sign up. It's really handy. You can create all kinds of QR codes. If you have your logos, you can add those there. If you want to download logos for things like social media or email, you should be able to Google Instagram PNG or Instagram transparent logo, and you should be able to see it in the images. You'll be able to really easily download those logos to use. So if anyone has any questions, that's kind of all I was going to talk about today.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Edie.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions, anybody?
Oh, I forgot to mention that QR codes are really handy for outdoor installations, especially for spaces like sculptures or other like public murals. If someone wants to find out, you can know about that mural or public installation, then you can always add a QR code that links to a website that describes it. Hi, Larry. What's up?
I didn't recognize you. Thank you. Sorry. We have historic signs at our old brick flour mill.
Yep.
And the very first two large 8x8 signs are First Nations. So the idea was to have it interpreted into different languages using a QR code.
Yep.
Have you done anything with language or recording or that kind of thing?
Yorkton's Treaty 6?
Treaty 4.
Treaty 4.
Yep.
So there's like a couple really good translation websites that I like to use, especially for Cree. One is called creedictionary.com. They have a really great, the University of Alberta put that together. Or you can find it as well in Ojibwe. I think there's another Ojibwe dictionary. Or you can get the tribal council should have someone who's able to like translate that for you. You can put that on a web page and link the sign to the web page. Whether you want to do that as like an image with the text that mirrors the text, or as like a link that says, click here to view in Cree or click here to view in Ojibwe. You can have those links like built onto your website if you've got someone sort of handy, or if you're able to do that. And you can find a translator to put that in Indigenous syllabics for you. So
my question is more relating. We have worked with our treaty commissioner in Saskatchewan, Mary Culberton.
Mm-hmm.
So when we did our initial sign, we sent all the pictures and the text to go with it, and they wordsmithed it, made it more in their language. I'm thinking of an audio or recording, so you'd actually hear somebody speaking in the language as they look at the sign. So not the text, it's more bringing it to life, three-dimensional kind of thing.
For something like the brick mill, which is a project I'm familiar with, so I can speak a little bit more in depth about it. But you could probably use something like a YouTube channel, which would be really handy for you guys anyway, because you can give people tours and local history, and you can talk a little bit about that. And you can embed those videos either on your website, or you can link them directly to the YouTube, or you can also add an MP3 file to your website, embed sound so that people can hear it, so that when they use the QR code, your webpage with the sound will pop up and you'll be able to play the sound.
That was my question. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. I'm excited to see that. The Arnsted's iPad. Sorry, I don't know your name, but that's what shows up. I use QR codes on signs on buildings to link info to their history. Oh yeah, that's a great idea. Exactly. And you can add some more dynamic stuff to that too, Arnsted's iPad, because you can add videos of those buildings, like tours of the inside or photos of the insides, galleries. Like you can really play and be creative with how you use QR codes, like for your specific use, because people are interested, and most people understand that, like if they see a QR code that has information, and they tend to be really curious about what that information looks like. And I mean, in the smaller local context, this isn't as important necessarily, because you're kind of like the local expert on these things, but having people click through a QR code to your website also allows it to be ranked better by Google. So it'll show up first when people are searching, like, oh, what should I do in Waskesiu? Your website might show up first because you have a lot of traffic coming to your website. So it shows that it's what's the word I'm looking for? That it has authority, domain authority. So it kind of has like a double purpose. It's really handy.
My name is Chris. Sorry, Chris Arnstead, not iPad. What we found too was the sign on the building people link to our heritage without having to visit the museum. So we're gathering a whole different crowd of people than ordinarily would come in the door. So when they're standing in line waiting to buy an ice cream cone, there's a round sign there. They link to it and they hear stories, see videos, hear music,
Yes.
whatever associated with that location. It's been great.
Well, and the great thing about that is that's a great way to demonstrate impact when you're applying for grants in a way that like isn't as easy when you're sort of just getting like physical signatures in a guest book. It shows a lot more data, and it's all already digitized for you. You can show like how you're impacting your community and what role you play. So I think that's a really great idea.
I could, Edie, just something that there are many things that are popping into my brain, and Dan will tell you that happens all the time. But one of the things that just struck me is how using QR codes really can make what you have, your content of your facility, your museum, far more accessible.
Yes.
Not only physically accessible for those that may not be able to get to your facility easily, but also the information more accessible for those that are visiting. If there's a QR code on a label that they can go to an oral history interview with somebody who used that cream separator, just for an example.
Yep.
Or a video that has somebody actually using the whole process of milking the cow and using the cream separator. Those are things that really would be very useful, I would think, in enriching the experience.
Well, and I kind of wrote in my notes something similar, like when you really get to amplify the experience of the viewer by giving them a 3D picture of like how those different art objects or artifacts or historical objects are used, like where they came from, different like acquisition information, like information about like the people who would have used that space. For something like the Red Mill project, you can show historical, Yorkton has a really great archive. So you can like show different like archival photos of that space or like people using that space. The other thing about that is that you can actually make those accessible to people with disabilities, which is really important and really hard when you're in a small museum or gallery setting, because you don't necessarily have the sort of funding or staff to be able to facilitate in a way that is like accessibility minded. So there's different resources that you can use to make that information accessible, whether you have someone reading that information out loud or giving you a verbal tour of the space, whether you have the text presented in a way that's easier for people who have different levels of sight, more accessible by using like high contrast. And actually I can I'll put a link in here as well to a website that is really handy when designing something like your website. It gives you like a contrast rating.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll allow you to choose colors that are really high contrast so that a lot of different people can read your text. And it's super handy. Or even using like different kinds of fonts to make information more accessible.
Mm-hmm.
I think QR codes are a really great way to add that kind of experience to your space, especially if you don't have the staff or capacity to really be engaged with every viewer, or if you're in an outdoor space where that kind of staffing isn't available and you want to give people like context.
Exactly. And there are so many different types of visitor to a space. Mm-hmm. There are three categories that I've always identified. There are the streakers who go in and they can visit your entire museum in 2 minutes flat because they just zip through and they read the headlines, the top piece of information. But if they can take a quick click at the different exhibits and be able to look at it later, they may get more. Then you have the strollers, they like to they'll look at this and then they'll look at that. And then you have the studiers, and they want every piece of information there may be available. And they're the ones that really would get into every single QR code, and they would be asking for more. But this is by having the QR codes as a way of augmenting what you can legitimately put on a label in a gallery or museum, it really helps to engage with more people on a deeper level. And it may be a way, you know, as you had said, another thing that just struck me is by being able to embed little surveys, you can help your own and the audience's ability to learn about and engage with those difficult topics, whether it's reconciliation, whether it's the environment, the climate crisis. There are ways for museums to help people to figure out what's going on and how it impacts them.
Yeah.
And this is one more tool to my mind.
Oh, exactly. And I think, like, you know, when we're talking about sort of like the ethics of museums, and when we're displaying certain artifacts, especially, I think it's really important to, as a tool of reconciliation and as like responsible arts administrators, like having links to information about those artifacts that like talk more about like how they were acquired, the responsibility of like of having and obtaining those objects, and like information about like where they came from, and continued cultural impact of having those artifacts. Stuff like that is really important. I think even if you are just linking to a map that a map of like all the languages in North America, all the indigenous languages in North America, or all the different treaties, or the treaty that you're a part of by visiting that museum or gallery space. I think that's a super easy thing to do, and it goes a really long way.
Even a link to the TRC calls to action.
Oh yeah.
For people are looking for more information, and they truly do trust museums to provide that kind of information.
Mm-hmm.
That's valid and accurate. And so the more we can do to help people to learn in a safe way, and it might also be a way of encouraging survivors to talk if they know that it's a safe location and that people can visit it, and you have put a notice that this could trigger. If you go to this site, it could trigger if you are a survivor or a family member.
I think that's really important. I also think how great to utilize QR codes in your communities as a way of encouraging younger members of the community and other like different members of the diverse members of the community to join your boards, to participate as volunteers, to access your space. Like I think that's a really sort of like undervalued way that we can like utilize technology to continue to encourage people to engage with our spaces.
I think we've learned that through the pandemic, that people love being able to go online and learn stuff, and that it broadens the audience, and it, as you say, it can broaden the appeal to become involved with the museum, because you know, people with my hair color are not the best ones for doing the techno stuff. ones with younger ones, we can call, and like you say, call on those millennials or younger and say, excuse me, could you make this work? We want to do this and this, and then let them go to town. It's a great way of encouraging that kind of involvement, and then that sense of ownership.
Mm-hmm. And I think like things like activating spaces is so important for communities that can't necessarily go into public locations now. Although of course that's like shifting, but I think this is like something to be mindful of, and something that it might continue to be, we might continue to experience like different levels of lockdowns or pandemics or other kinds of emergencies that make it so that it's harder to access physical spaces. And to some people, physical spaces weren't accessible in the first place. So building on this accessibility, I think, is super awesome, and activating our communities is super awesome, and being able to share information in a way that is really easy and requires a lot less. It doesn't require that much of the staff and volunteers or board members of those spaces, I think is really important. And imagine like if 200 people are accessing your QR codes on the side of a building, imagine activating those people for donations. It adds a whole new level to your ability to access your community and continue to drive engagement and also demonstrate your impact.
Another thing that just struck me, you could put QR codes on laminated sheets as part of a school kit.
Yeah, 100%.
Because schools are not really they don't have the resources to do the level of visits that they used to do to museums and galleries.
Mm-hmm.
If you can put a kit together that goes to the museum and has all of that, you can put all kinds of things on your website that would be directed through via a QR code.
Absolutely. And there's great ways to build like lesson plans using, you can get really complicated. You can build lesson plans using things like VR. You can build lesson plans using using different kinds of like treasure hunts on the web, on the web. Like there's lots of different cool ways to utilize QR codes. So you can be really creative, I think. And anyone can, oh, sorry, Wendy.
No, I was just going to say the ideas are just popping up all over the place.
Yeah, it's like once you kind of get the hang of it, it's really easy to like see how they can be utilized in all kinds of different ways, whether indoors or outdoors, for sharing information, for accessibility, for school groups. There's lots of different ways to utilize that technology, which just is more and more and more accessible. And yeah, it's really exciting.
For sure. That's super exciting. I don't want to cut off the discussion because it's really great. But before people start having to drop out and do other things here, I'm just going to stick a couple of things in the chat, a couple of links really quick. So that is things like upcoming and past community chats. Upcoming, by the way, includes another chat by Edie, which I'm super excited to see. This time it'll be about email marketing, which is great. There is a call for presenters for community chat. So if you have an idea for a chat that you think we should have, and especially if you're willing to also present that, then please let us know, and we'll definitely sort of see what the schedule looks like. And we're also looking for submissions for our 2021 awards. So if you know someone who really deserves some extra recognition for their work with museums, check out the site and consider making a nomination. All right, so for any of you who do need to get going on with your day, thanks for tuning in. It was really great to have you, and hopefully we'll see you next time. And for those of you who want to stick around and chat a little bit more, as long as Edie's up for it, we can do that too.
I was gonna say, if anyone has questions or they want some resources, like feel free to reach out to me via email. I don't mind. I'll try to get back to you in like a good due time. I'm happy to help.
What is your email?
So my email is Edith Rattery, so EDITH RATTARY @gmail.com. Oh, thanks, Dan. Thanks, Chris. I promise not to call you Arnstead's iPad anymore.
All right. Well, if there are no more questions or anything, we can probably wrap it up. If you do have more questions, yeah, I mean, Edith has kindly provided her email there, so definitely follow up there, or contact us at the office, and we can either pass that along to Edith or whatever. But yeah, thank you again for coming. Hope to see you next time.
Thanks, Edie. It was very interesting, I must say.
It's a lot of information, so hopefully everyone is able to utilize it.
We'll see when we go out on the road again, we'll see all these QR codes popping up all over the place. It'll be good. Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Great to see you, Edie.
Great to see you, Larry.